Smoke curled into the darkened sky, a silent testament to the brutality of the battle that had raged across the colony world of Arcadia 4. The once thriving city had been reduced to rubble, its towering structures now skeletal remains of shattered steel and stone. From the top of collapsed overpass, Captain Logan Reeves peered through the scope of his rifle, his sharp eyes scanning the wreckage below. Imperial patrols moved methodically, their sleek, silver armor glinting under the eerie light of Arcadia's twin moons. They carried plasma rifles, their movements precise, practiced, and laced with an arrogance that had become all too familiar. "They're making sport of it," Reeves muttered, his jaw tightening. Behind him, Sergeant Marcus Cole adjusted the straps of his gear, his calloused hands working quickly. "They don't see us as a threat, Cap. Can't say I blame him. We keep throwing lead at shields that don't break." Lieutenant Eric Hayes, kneeling beside a battered crate of salvaged ammunition, let out a bitter chuckle. "They think we're using sticks and stones. Ballistics are a joke to them." A distant explosion punctuated his words, followed by the unmistakable sound of human screams. Reeves exhaled sharply, his grip tightening on his rifle. The Empire had come to Arcadia, for with a single, brutal purpose, to break humanity's spirit. Their technology was centuries ahead, their fleets invincible, and their soldiers encased in armor that shrugged off everything short of an artillery strike. But worse than their firepower was their disdain. Imperial officers broadcast their mockery through hijacked frequencies, laughing at the primitive nature of human weaponry. Plasma was the future, they claimed, and humanity's reliance on kinetic rounds was nothing but an embarrassing relic of the past. They had been proven right time and again as waves of human forces fell before their energy-based onslaught, bullets flattening harmlessly against shimmering personal shields, while return fire melted flesh from bone. "We've got movement," Corporal Jason Ward murmured, his voice low as he peered through his rifle's scope. "Looks like another sweep." Reeves followed his gaze. A squad of Imperial troopers marched into the ruins below, their steps measured and unhurried. There was no urgency, no tension, just the certainty of superiority. 5-man patrol, Reeves calculated. Standard formation. Shields up, weapons primed. Ward adjusted his aim. "I could take one. Maybe two. And then what?" Cole interjected. "We poke the bear, and the whole damn Legion comes down on our heads." "Maybe that's what we need," Reeves said, his voice carrying the weight of hard choices. "A reason to hit back. A real one." Hayes gestured toward the ammo crates beside him, a grim smirk playing at his lips. "Unless we find a way to crack those shields, we're throwing pebbles at a tank." The sound of boots crunching against debris silenced them. The Imperials had found survivors. Below, a group of ragged civilians was herded from the shadows of a collapsed storefront. Men, women, a few children. Their faces bore the same mixture of exhaustion and terror that Reeves had seen too many times. An Imperial officer, clad in pristine black armor, strode forward with the casual arrogance of a predator that had never known fear. He spoke, his voice amplified by his helmet speakers. Another band of primitives scurrying in the dirt. His tone was rich with amusement. "Tell me, do you still think your metal slugs can save you?" Reeves watched, every muscle in his body coiled with tension. He had seen this play out before. The officer would taunt them, demand they resist, and then execute them when they inevitably failed to fight back. The civilians remained silent. A young man stepped forward, his fists clenched at his sides. The officer tilted his head. Some fight left." He turned to one of his soldiers. "Give him a weapon." A discarded pistol was kicked toward the young man's feet. He hesitated, glancing toward his family. "Pick it up," the officer encouraged. "Show me your spirit." Reeves ground his teeth. "Ward, how fast can you?" The young man lunged, grabbing the pistol and firing. The shot was well placed, aimed straight at the officer's visor. It never connected. A translucent shield shimmered in the air, absorbing the impact with effortless ease. The officer sighed. predictable. A plasma bolt flared in the night. The young man crumpled. His body hit the ground before the echo of the shot had faded. Reeves closed his eyes for the briefest moment. The officer turned back to the remaining civilians. "See, your weapons are useless. You are." A second plasma shot rang out. Another body fell. The officer holstered his weapon. "Finish the rest." Reeves inhaled sharply. "Cole, get your charges ready. Hayes, find us an exit." Cole's hands were already moving, planting small, shaped explosives along the overpass supports. "Give me a target," Ward whispered, his finger brushing the trigger of his rifle. Reeves considered the numbers. If they opened fire now, they could drop 2, maybe 3 Imperials before they were forced to flee. It wouldn't be enough to save the civilians. It wouldn't change anything, but it would be a start. He exhaled. "Make it count." Ward's rifle kicked against his shoulder. The officer's visor cracked as his head snapped backward. The Imperials barely had time to react before Cole's charges detonated. The overpass groaned, steel and concrete collapsing in a cascade of destruction. Smoke and dust swallowed the street, cutting off pursuit. "Move!" Reeves barked, leading his men into the ruins. They ran, feet pounding against broken pavement, weaving through the skeletal remains of the city. The Imperials would regroup. They would retaliate. And they would come with the full force of their mockery, their firepower, their contempt. Reeves welcomed it, because now he was ready to hit back. The bunker smelled of oil, rust, and age, a forgotten relic buried beneath Arcadia, 4's desolation. Captain Logan Reeves scanned the dimly lit interior, his eyes adjusting to the flickering emergency lights that still pulsed weakly after decades of abandonment. The place was a graveyard of another era, one where humanity's wars had been fought with steel and lead rather than plasma and energy fields. Stacks of corroded ammunition crates lined the walls, their markings faded but still legible. Weapons, long thought obsolete, lay in dust-covered racks, bolt-action rifles, pump-action shotguns, and belt-fed machine guns that once thundered across battlefields left to history. Sergeant Marcus Cole crouched near a pile of old munitions, running his hands over the stenciled lettering on a steel case. His lips curled into a smirk. "Damn, this is some real cowboy stuff." Lieutenant Eric Hayes wiped grime from the side of a massive, wheeled weapon, its barrels thick and menacing even under decades of neglect. "This ain't just cowboy stuff," he muttered, his voice laced with something close to reverence. "This is history." Corporal Jason Ward leaned against a rusted workbench, shaking his head. "History doesn't mean a damn thing if it doesn't keep us alive." Reeves stepped closer, studying the weapon that had caught Hayes' attention. A 6-barrel monstrosity, its rotating cylinders built to vomit lead at impossible speeds. A Gatling gun, designed at a time before humanity had reached for the stars. His fingers traced the metal, feeling its weight, its potential. "Their shields can stop energy," he murmured, "but they weren't built for this." Cole let out a low whistle. "You think this thing will chew through him?" Reeves nodded. "At high enough velocity, solid rounds can punch through shield harmonics. The Imperials never bothered with kinetic resistance. Too primitive, too outdated. They never expected anyone to hit M with something like this." Hayes crouched beside a long disassembled power source, rubbing his chin. "We can get it working, but we'll need ammo that can punch through more than just their armor." He turned to Cole. "Think you can rig something up?" Cole grinned. "Give me enough time, and I'll make rounds so dense they'll leave craters in their chests." Reeves exhaled, his mind already racing through the possibilities. They had been on the run for too long, stuck in a war where the enemy dictated the terms. Plasma weapons were the future, the Imperials had declared, and kinetic munitions were relics of a bygone age. That arrogance had cost humanity dearly. It was time to make them choke on it. Ward frowned, glancing toward the bunker entrance. "Even if we get this thing running, we can't just lug it into a firefight. It's a defensive weapon, not something we can carry." Hayes wiped his hands on his fatigues. "We don't need to carry it. We need to set a trap." Cole clapped his hands together. "Now you're talking." They worked in silence, each man falling into his role as if it were second nature. Cole broke down old rounds, testing different compositions, shaving tungsten cores, modifying casings to hold heavier loads. Hayes disassembled the Gatling gun, clearing decades of neglect, rewiring old connections, stripping unnecessary weight. Ward kept watch, his rifle never more than an arm's reach away, scanning the ruined city for any sign of Imperial patrols. Reeves oversaw it all, making adjustments, ensuring they weren't just repairing an old weapon but reshaping it into something lethal. Hours passed, stretching into what felt like days. The bunker became a forge of innovation and desperation, a place where old ghosts whispered of forgotten wars, while new warriors carved out their survival. The sound of machinery hummed through the space, the scent of oil and gunpowder thickening as they worked. Cole wiped sweat from his brow, inspecting a modified round beneath the harsh glow of a work lamp. "Heavy as hell," he muttered, rolling it in his palm. "This thing's gonna hit like a truck." Reeves examined the ammunition, feeling its weight, its promise. "We need a test." Ward nodded toward the far end of the bunker, where rusted sheets of scrap metal had been stacked haphazardly. "That should do." Cole loaded a single round into an old rifle, braced himself, and pulled the trigger. The shot cracked through the bunker like a whip, a sharp reminder of an era long buried. The metal target didn't just dent. It caved inward, folding like paper, the slug punching clean through. Cole let out a low whistle. "That's a kill shot." Hayes stepped back, admiration flashing in his eyes. "Now imagine 1,000 of those per second." Reeves allowed himself the ghost of a smile. "Let's make it happen." The trap had to be perfect. They knew the Imperials would come. Patrols had been sweeping the ruins, methodically tightening their grip. The Empire believed in efficiency, in overwhelming force, and striking before its enemies had a chance to react. They would never expect resistance from a group of humans, armed with what they considered outdated garbage. Reeves studied the streets through a cracked window. "We picked the right spot, we hit him hard, and we leave nothing standing." They chose an old industrial sector, its skeletal remains forming a natural choke point. Collapsed buildings created limited paths of entry, funneling movement into predictable routes. They wired the area with makeshift traps, explosive charges, rigged debris, old fuel cells primed to ignite. The Gatling gun was mounted in the remains of a factory, its barrels gleaming under layers of grime. Ward set up in a sniper's nest above, his rifle steady. "This is either going to be genius," he muttered, "or the dumbest thing we've ever done." Cole patted the Gatling gun, his grin feral. "I like our odds." Reeves positioned himself near the gun's controls, his hands firm. The plan was simple. Let the Imperials get comfortable, let them think they were wiping out another pocket of human resistance, and then unleash something they had never faced before. It didn't take long. The first signs came in the form of shifting shadows, the unmistakable hum of Imperial hovercraft, slicing through the air. Armored soldiers disembarked with practiced ease, scanning the area, their movements methodical. They advanced in formation, confident, untouchable. Reeves waited. A commanding officer stepped forward, his voice crackling through an amplifier. "Humans, we know you are here. Surrender your weapons, and you may." The Gatling gun roared to life. The silence of the ruined city shattered beneath its deafening barrage. The barrel spun with a mechanical howl, spitting death at a rate that defied comprehension. Imperial shields flared, struggled, and then failed as high-density rounds tore through them like wet paper. Soldiers crumpled under the onslaught, their once impervious armor reduced to scrap metal and bloodied fragments. Panic rippled through the ranks. They had come expecting another one-sided massacre. Instead, they were being eviscerated by a weapon they had dismissed as obsolete. Ward's rifle cracked, picking off survivors with cold precision. Cole tossed grenades into the fray, their explosions ripping through already broken formations. Hayes kept the gun fed, his hands moving in a blur, ensuring the relentless storm of bullets never slowed. Reeves didn't stop firing until the last body hit the ground. Smoke drifted through the ruins, mingling with the acrid scent of burnt flesh and scorched metal. The Imperials lay scattered, their bodies twisted, their weapons useless. Cole let out a breathless laugh. "Holy hell!" Reeves stared at the carnage, his grip tightening on the weapon. The Empire had mocked them, had treated humanity's weapons as relics of a lesser species. Now they would learn otherwise. The battlefield was unrecognizable. What had once been an Imperial-controlled sector was now a graveyard of shattered armor and scorched metal. The bodies of Imperial soldiers lay in twisted heaps, their gleaming armor riddled with holes, their once impenetrable shields having failed them in the face of something they had never prepared for. Smoke lingered in the air, mixing with the stench of burnt flesh and ozone, the scent of a war that had taken an unexpected turn. Captain Logan Reeves stood over the wreckage, his gaze unwavering as he surveyed the aftermath. The Gatling gun, still mounted in the ruined factory, was slick with oil and blood, its barrels warm from the sheer volume of fire it had unleashed. Lieutenant Eric Hayes wiped soot from his face, his hands still trembling from feeding the beast round after round. Sergeant Marcus Cole sat nearby, grinning despite the exhaustion etched into his features. Corporal Jason Ward crouched on a pile of rubble, his rifle balanced across his knees, scanning for any signs of movement. They never saw it coming, Cole muttered, rolling his shoulders. We tore through them like paper. Ward exhaled, shifting his grip on his rifle. They'll see it coming next time. Reeves nodded. The Imperials had underestimated them once. That mistake wouldn't be repeated. The enemy had always relied on superior firepower, on energy-based weapons that rendered most human defenses useless. But they hadn't counted on what raw, unrelenting kinetic force could do when pushed to the extreme. The shields had held for a few seconds, but at the rate the Gatling gun had been firing, those few seconds had meant nothing. They'll send more, Hayes said, rubbing his temples. Not patrols, not squads, full-strike teams, maybe walkers. They're not going to take this lightly. Cole scoffed, kicking at the remains of an Imperial soldier. Let him. We've got enough lead to make him regret it. Reeves knew better than to share that confidence outright. They had scored a victory, but the weight of retaliation loomed over them like a storm. The Imperials weren't just going to send reinforcements. They would send overwhelming force. He had seen what they did to resistance cells that managed to put up a fight. Cities wiped clean. Civilian populations burned as warnings. No survivors. No second chances. This wasn't just about killing them, Reeves said, voice measured. We made a statement. They don't like statements. Ward adjusted his scope, peering down into the ruined streets. Then we hit him again before they can hit back. The idea had merit. Staying put was suicide. The moment the Imperials regrouped, this position would be flattened. Their best chance was to move before the hammer came down. We take the gun, Reeves decided. We hit another target. Make it look like there's more of us than there really are. Cole raised an eyebrow. We hauling that beast across the city. Reeves glanced back at the weapon, its massive frame still secured in place. It wasn't designed for mobility, but it had already proven its worth. They couldn't afford to leave it behind. Break it down, Hayes suggested. Mount it to a truck. Get it somewhere high, somewhere with a clear line of sight. We could turn this whole city into a kill zone. Reeves considered the logistics. They had enough fuel for one of the abandoned transport rigs, still buried in the industrial district. It wouldn't be fast, but it would be mobile enough to set up wherever they needed it. We find the right spot. We draw them in, Reeves said, already forming the plan in his mind. They'll come expecting resistance. We'll give them annihilation. Ward smirked, but his eyes remained sharp. Then let's get to work. The Gatling gun was heavy, even stripped down to its core components. They worked quickly, sweat mixing with grime, as they secured the weapon onto the back of an old transport, reinforcing the frame, ensuring the barrels wouldn't shake loose under sustained fire. Ammunition was packed in crates, the modified rounds loaded and ready. They moved before dawn, the battered vehicle rumbling through the ruins of Arcadia 4, its tires kicking up dust as it wound through forgotten roads. They passed the remnants of what had once been homes, businesses, schools, places where life had thrived before the Empire had arrived. Now, all that remained were skeletal structures and the occasional flicker of movement in the shadows. They weren't alone. Reeves spotted them first, civilians, hiding in the wreckage, their faces gaunt, their eyes hollow. Survivors. The battle had drawn them out, given them a glimmer of something they hadn't had in a long time. Hope. Cole tapped the dashboard. They're watching. Reeves nodded. Let him. Word would spread. Humanity wasn't done. They reached their new position as the first rays of sunlight bled across the horizon. A crumbling skyscraper, its upper floors still intact, its vantage point offering a clear view of the streets below. It was the perfect spot. The transport was parked beneath a collapsed section of road, partially concealed. The Gatling gun was mounted on a reinforced platform, angled toward the approach they knew the Imperials would take. Then they waited. Hours passed. The city remained eerily quiet, the distant hum of Imperial machinery, the only indication that the enemy was mobilizing. Then came the thunder. Reeves spotted the first transport through his binoculars, a sleek, black-armored personnel carrier, moving with the confidence of something that had never known fear. More followed, dozens of foot soldiers, armored walkers, their mechanical legs clicking against the pavement. A full strike force. The Empire was done playing games. Hayes checked the Gatling gun's ammunition feed, his hand steady. They brought the whole damn cavalry. Ward positioned himself on the upper floors, lining up his first shot. "We doing this?" Reeves exhaled. The Imperials moved in formation, their weapons raised, their scanners sweeping the ruins. They didn't expect resistance. Not here. Not from a species they had already deemed defeated. He waited until they were in position, until their arrogance had led them straight into the kill zone. Then he pulled the trigger. The Gatling gun spun to life, a monstrous roar echoing through the empty streets. The first wave of Imperial soldiers vanished in a spray of shredded metal and broken bodies. Their walkers staggered as rounds ripped through their joints, severing hydraulic lines, sending them crashing to the ground. Shields flickered and failed, their technology overwhelmed by sheer, unrelenting force. Panic spread through their ranks. Ward's rifle cracked, precision shots finding the gaps in their armor, dropping officers before they could issue new orders. Cole lobbed explosives, shrapnel tearing through tightly packed squads. The Empire had come expecting to crush a handful of human rebels. Instead, they had walked into an execution. Reeves didn't stop firing. Not until the last soldier fell. The battlefield fell silent once more, but this time, it wasn't human bodies littering the streets. It was theirs. The stench of burning metal and scorched flesh clung to the air, thick and suffocating. Smoke curled from the wreckage of the Imperial strike force, their once imposing armored walkers reduced to smoldering husks. The streets were littered with the dead, bodies crumpled where they had fallen, their gleaming armor now marred with bullet holes and blood. The silence that followed was unnerving, the eerie stillness of a battlefield where only one side remained standing. Captain Logan Reeves kept his weapon raised as he scanned the carnage. The Imperial advance had been swift, overwhelming in numbers and technology, but none of that had mattered in the face of sheer, unrelenting firepower. The Gatling gun had spoken, and the enemy had fallen. He exhaled slowly, allowing the reality of their victory to settle in, but the weight of what came next was already pressing down on him. Lieutenant Eric Hayes wiped sweat and soot from his face, his hands stained with gun oil and blood. The feed system of the Gatling gun was still smoking, the barrels glowing faintly from the intensity of sustained fire. He gave a tired grin, though exhaustion dulled its edges. "Well," he muttered, running a hand through his grimy hair, "I think they got the message." Sergeant Marcus Cole let out a low chuckle, kneeling beside an Imperial officer's corpse, prying a sidearm from its holster. He inspected the craftsmanship, unimpressed, before tossing it aside. "They brought the best they had," he said, stretching his aching shoulders. "Didn't make a damn bit of difference." Corporal Jason Ward remained crouched near the rubble, his rifle balanced against his knee, his sharp gaze flickering between the ruined buildings. "They'll send more," he said, his voice measured. "Not just soldiers next time. They'll bring bombers, heavy artillery. If they can't break us head-on, they'll level this whole damn city." Reeves knew he was right. The Empire was predictable in its brutality. They had underestimated humanity once, and now that they had suffered an undeniable defeat, their response would be absolute. There would be no attempt to recover their fallen, no hesitation in unleashing orbital bombardments. That was their way. Overwhelming force, complete annihilation, leaving nothing but scorched earth in their wake. "Then we don't stay here," Reeves said, stepping over the wreckage as he made his way back toward the transport. "We keep moving. We hit them again before they can regroup." Cole frowned. "We can't drag the Gatling gun all over the damn city, Cap. As much as I love that beast, it ain't exactly made for quick getaways." Reeves nodded, already considering their options. The gun had served its purpose. It had proven what they were capable of, shattered the illusion of Imperial invulnerability. But their fight wasn't about a single weapon. It was about adapting, outmaneuvering the enemy, refusing to play by their rules. Hayes leaned against the truck, rolling his shoulders. We need to go underground. The tunnels beneath the industrial sector. We can move without being spotted, set up ambushes where they won't expect them. Ward gave a slight nod. The old maintenance lines run deep. We could use them to get behind their next advance, hit their command posts before they even know we're there. Reeves considered it. The tunnels were dangerous, unstable, crawling with hazards, but they offered the only real chance of survival. The Imperials would scan for heat signatures, deploy drones to track them down. Staying above ground would mean certain death. We take what we can carry, he decided. The rest we destroy. If they want this position back, they can have it, along with a few 1,000 pounds of explosives. Cole grinned. Now you're talking my language. They worked quickly, stripping the Gatling gun of anything useful before rigging the rest with detonation charges. The remaining ammunition was stacked together, primed to turn the entire area into a death trap the moment the Imperials tried to reclaim it. The tunnels yawned before them, dark and foreboding. The stench of stagnant air and rusted metal filled their nostrils as they descended into the depths of the ruined city. The silence down there was different, heavier, pressing in on them from all sides. Their footsteps echoed against the concrete, the distant drip of water the only sound accompanying them. Reeves led the way, his rifle raised, his eyes scanning for movement. The tunnels stretched for miles beneath the city, a labyrinth of forgotten infrastructure, once meant for maintenance crews and supply routes, now a potential battlefield. They moved cautiously, navigating the twisting corridors, marking potential choke points where they could stage their next attack. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the air became, the weight of the planet itself seeming to press down on them. Then Ward held up a fist, signaling a stop. Reeves tensed, following his gaze to a faint glow ahead. Not the cold blue of Imperial scanners, but something different, something human. They weren't alone. As they approached, shadows emerged from the dim light. Survivors, men, women, and children, their faces gaunt, their eyes wary. Reeves lowered his weapon slightly, meeting the gaze of an older man who stood at the front of the group, his posture rigid despite the exhaustion in his expression. "You're the ones who hit the Imperials," the man said, his voice rough with disbelief. "We heard the fighting. We thought—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "We thought no one could stand against them." Reeves glanced at his men, the weight of what they had done settling over them. The battle hadn't just been about survival. It had been about something bigger. "They can be beaten," Reeves said simply. The man studied him for a long moment before nodding. "Then you'll need more than just guns. You'll need people willing to fight." Behind him, others stepped forward, men who had once been soldiers, workers, engineers, all of them with the same hardened determination in their eyes. A resistance. Reeves had known that winning a single battle wouldn't change the tide of the war. But this was something else. The Imperials could crush buildings, burn cities, wipe entire populations from existence. But they couldn't kill the will to fight. "We move at dawn," Reeves said. "We take the fight to them. And we don't stop until they're the ones running." For the first time in a long time, there was hope. And hope, he knew, was the deadliest weapon of all.